Honest J. Nowak. Oh yeah.
A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to Mark of the Line on Honest J. Nowak. And for today's subject, I feel like that we should probably get into some more well-known territory. Or maybe at least get into something that is still around today. But Porsche, of course, is not necessarily as much well-known as this next company that I'm going to be talking about right now, Ford. Where the slogan is, built tough or go further by today's standards. The slogan is still being interchanged every now and then, and we do get to see some new variations of it. But anyways, Henry Ford, the original founder of the Ford Motor Company in 1903, basically did things a lot more differently. This was, of course, years before the establishment of most other companies out there in the business. But Ford was something that really was indeed different than many others. Because the big thing about Ford, in retrospect to many others in its class, had grown on through the many decades that had passed by. It was one of the few companies that was able to survive the Great Depression, the rise of gangster livelihoods, the Dust Bowl, and many other unique things that happened in the 1930s. But of course, that goes without saying. You can't really go too far without mentioning the Model T, which was of course around at that time. Ford Model Ts, Model As, Model anything, they were very popular throughout the 1920s. But going further than that, especially with the Deluxe and Super Deluxe in the 1940s, which of course became very well-known economy class sedans or coupes that ran especially for post-World War II related dilemmas that would eventually follow. In the 1950s though, Ford of course would become much more bigger, with the introduction of such models out there, including the Customs. And by 1960, there would be the Galaxy. That sedan of course had been popularized thanks to certain TV shows in the 1960s like The Andy Griffith Show, for example, as the main police cruiser that is used for Sheriff Andy Taylor and Deputy Barney Fife in the series. But the main thing about the Ford Motor Company would probably be best known for the Mustang. Out of all models that currently exist in the Ford Motor Company, the Mustang would probably be the best known by far. Beginning around 1962 with the concept car, and then another one in 1963, and then finally its full-fledged variation that we've come to know about in 1965, the Mustang was indeed a revolutionary new look at the muscle car. And there would of course be many others that would eventually follow along. Dodge would come up with the Charger, Chevrolet would come up with the Camaro, Buick would come up with the GSX, and many other muscle cars of that exact era in the mid to late 60s were invented around that time. But the Mustang proved to be much sportier, much more economically well priced, and also high performing in its class, in most unique ways. And that is of course what led to immense success in the Ford Motor Company, as well as a lot of trust. But there are indeed some cons that came around to pretty much push the company down much further. The Ford Pinto, first introduced in 1971, and is supposedly reported to refer to a Brazilian slang term, which of course is pretty NSFW by all standards, but the Pinto was indeed an attempt to try and bring out the hatchback in Ford itself. It's very popular today to have a bunch of hatchbacks around, including the Fiesta and Focus, to name a few, but the Pinto was indeed one of Ford's most earliest attempts ever known. But the big thing about it was that it suffered from immense failures due to the fact that its gas tank was wedged too close to other prime sensitive and volatile parts of the vehicle itself, which would render it completely unfeasible, especially if you end up getting rear-ended. The Pinto would be prone to explosion when getting hit by the tail end. And this, of course, has led Ford to suffer from a lot of lawsuits and even a few charges, which, of course, were so immensely severe. Ford did remove the Pinto, but the damage was pretty much done in that particular era. It would take a few decades, at least, to help clean up this mess. With the reintroduction of the Mustang in hands for various generations, as well as the usage of various other models, in 1986, though, there came the Taurus, which still runs around today. But the Taurus was indeed another big revolution in Ford's lineup of modern-day automobiles in the industry. It was, in fact, a very well-priced, economic, practical sedan out there in the mid to late 80s. And it was also one of the few that would eventually spark a design quirk that would eventually become famous with the 90s. More curvier styling cues. Curvier edges, not so squarey looks, would pretty much become a very popular usage of automobile design in the 1990s. And even up until today, we still have that sort of curvy sort of look used on most vehicles. But it was mostly because of Ford that we now have the curviness back, as it was not very good back in the day, or so many people thought. But now it's deemed to be a lot better in most ways. But judging by the many models that Ford currently has, we currently have ourselves the combination of the Escape, Explorer, Expedition, Edge, Mustang, and even the reintroduction of a few much older models out there, the GT and the Bronco. That's right. Here in 2021, we now have the Ford Bronco once again, after more than 20 years of it being retired, pretty much. As a matter of fact, you can see a lot of Broncos out here today. Man, it just goes to show that overwhelming fan demand can really be a huge importance to you and your company. But for the most part, we can at least rely on Ford to really do great in the industry thus far, after introducing a lot of great revolutionary aspects and also inventing a lot of incredible feats of engineering that not many people have ever seen throughout history. For more than 115 years now, we've got ourselves a true industry in automotive manufacturing. However, if there are indeed 5 models I would like to see brought back at some point, then well, simply put, I would love to see the Thunderbird, Torino, the Maverick, as well as, well, some others here and there. I feel like that they should also bring back the Star series of minivans, which were also a big thing in the 90s. But I don't really know if that's ever going to happen anymore, but I guess it's all up to them. But you know what? I feel like we got it good. So, I feel like that was a pretty long thread right there, but it felt good to pretty much get that whole entire thing out of the way. So, I might as well get it back into some not so well charted territory starting tomorrow. But don't worry, there will be other well-known brands out there that I will also cover on throughout the next few weeks. But until then, I'm Jay Nowak. This has been Honest Jay Nowak. And if you want to see more go down on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.